An Israeli army reservist has told DW News that the goal of Israel's war against Hamas is to, quote, conquer Gaza for the political survival of the government. He's among a number of reservists now refusing to serve who are speaking about the conflict, as DW's Tania Kramer reports.
Israelis protest near the border with Gaza last month, calling for an end to the war and the return of the hostages. Among them Ron Feiner, an Israel Defense Forces combat officer and reservist. He served for 270 days since the war in Gaza began as a platoon commander in southern Lebanon. After the government broke a ceasefire in Gaza in March, Feiner says he decided not to serve anymore.
This decision, it was clear that the goal of the war is not to bring back the hostages and bring security and a long-term ceasefire that will bring us a long-term, maybe negotiations and peace. It was clear that the goal of the war is to conquer Gaza or to for the political survival of the government.
Yotam Wilk, an officer in the Armored Corps, also opposes what the government has been doing in Gaza. He went to southern Israel on October 7 and as a volunteer commanded a tank against the Hamas-led attacks that took place that day. He later served as a soldier in 2 tours in Gaza and its border area. But last October he was among some 200 soldiers who signed a letter saying they would stop fighting if the government didn't secure a ceasefire to bring the hostages home and end the war.
We were told that there are certain goals that we can achieve, that the military force will be used to some extent, that we will have goals that are releasing the hostages, defeating Hamas, and finding a different solution. And actually, at this point, I really do not understand why are we continuing and destroying Gaza. I really do not know.
Wilk says it is a complicated situation, but he felt that there has been a sense of impunity among Israeli soldiers when it comes to civilian death in Gaza.
One of the problems, among a lot of them, that there is no accountability towards the action that soldiers do. So it doesn't really matter if you how much of validation did you have on the fact that this person was indeed a terrorist? It doesn't really matter because there is no accountability. You won't hear about the Israeli authorities looking on anything concerning death of Palestinians.
Feiner was also outraged by army practices while finding and destroying Hezbollah weapons in villages in southern Lebanon. He says some villages' houses were destroyed for no real reason.
This became a part of the mission, so we had also to blow up like houses that had no military equipment in them. And it is not a specific command from my commander. This is a part of the large war. Everybody does it. And for me, it was also, yes, one thing that made my decision clearer that we should stop it.
Feiner is one of the few reservists to be sentenced to 25 days in a military prison for refusing to serve. Both say Israel has the right to defend itself. Some are calling them traitors for refusing to serve any longer, but others support them for following their conscience.
DW has contacted the Israeli military in response to Tania's report. We've so far not had any reply. Well, earlier I spoke to Yossi Mekelberg from Chatham House think tank in London. He told us more.
I think there are 2 types of this, and the one that we just heard, that people are ready to speak out and say it in public, including to overseas media outlets, and they're very adamant not to serve. But there is also huge resentment among those who serve in who serve in the reserve. But after, committing hundreds and hundreds of days over the last 21 months, they decide just not to show up. They don't make a political point, they just don't show up. And we know that if at the beginning of the war, more than 100% of people in these units showed up, meaning even if they were not called, they still showed up. Now it's down to around 50%, which shows you what many of these reservists that has to, to commit in the name of this war things that, as we just heard, probably amount to war crimes, don't want to do it anymore.
What about public sentiment in Israel towards the war in Gaza and Netanyahu's strategy there? How supportive is the Israeli public?
The Israeli public for a long time, for more than a year, says number one priority should be bringing the hostages back, more than 70%. Gradually, they also see no point in continuing the war in Gaza because they see the price that comes with that in terms what Israel is committing in Gaza, humanitarian disaster, the hostages are not back, the economic price to that, the social price, the soldiers that come back in trauma, soldiers are killed. So on any level, they ask themselves, what left to do in Gaza that hasn't been achieved? And more it becomes apparent, yes, it's about the survival of Netanyahu in power, it's the survival of the coalition, and nothing to do with Israel's security.
Well, meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has arrived in Washington as negotiators in Qatar try to agree a ceasefire in Gaza. Netanyahu and U.S. President Trump are set to meet later at the White House. Yossi, what are Netanyahu's objectives in meeting with Trump right now? What does he need to achieve?
It's very delicate balance for him. On the one hand, he knows what we all know, that the war in Gaza ran its course and there was need to move from the military to the diplomatic, end the war, bring the hostages back, allow humanitarian aid there, and to look into the future governance of Gaza, and maybe to move further into dealing with the Palestinian issue, and in the background, the talks about expanding and extending the Abraham Accords, potentially Saudi Arabia, potentially Syria. But he has immediate issue with his coalition because some of the ultra-right says if the war ends now in Gaza, they leave, and he might not have a coalition. So he needs to come, that's basically to be seen as this is a Trump decision, that's a pressure that he can actually resist. At the same time, we see from his behavior in the last week or so that he is already preparing for election.
Now, these latest talks between Israel and Hamas that have been taking place in Doha, those talks have so far not produced a breakthrough with respect to ending the war, at least getting a ceasefire. Trump said a deal, however, could happen this week. How realistic is that?
I think there is some level of realism, but with these two sides, you never know until it really happens. We saw that back in January, with enough pressure from Washington, but then also in the region from Egypt and Qatar on Hamas, they reached an agreement. But again, the question for both of them, what they want to achieve, and still there is some issues when it comes to whether it's a ceasefire that leads to end of war, it's a ceasefire just that brings the hostages back, brings some humanitarian aid and release of Palestinian prisoners, but doesn't end the war. That, in this sense, for Hamas, there is less interest in that. There is the question of the presence of the IDF in Gaza during the truce and beyond. Who is going to govern? Who is in control of the crossings in Gaza? So there are still open issues. At the end of the day, there is no perfect solution there. They will have to agree that this war, again, ran its course, and it will only be resolved probably for serious pressure from Washington and from the region.
Yossi, thank you very much for your insights. That was Yossi Mekelberg of Chatham House in London.